Hello, Abnormal Investigations. This story is going to lead me into a little bit about what happened to me at my granny's house. So you're going to get a personal story with an encounter that was sent in, and I think y'all are going to enjoy this one. It kind of reminded me of something that happened at my granny's, and I thought it was important to talk about, so I'll put it at the end of this encounter. I want to thank each and every one of you for supporting Hunter and helping bring Hunter home. Your prayers and everything is very much appreciated. His court is very close, and we pray for victory. And we just know that Hunter's coming home, and we're ready for that. And thank you so very much. I was spending a month with my cousins at my grandma's house. It was August, and my cousins' ages ranged from 10 to 15, and I was the oldest, being 15. I was staying with a 10, 13, and 14-year-old. We stayed up telling scary stories often, but one night, a few weeks in, we decided to make a campfire out back. My grandma's house is in the rural suburb. The neighbors aren't too far when you're driving down the road to her house, but in the backyard, it's a thick forest with man-made paths through it. Each house is on a hill, so only part of the basement was actually underground. That isn't important until later, though. So, we're towards the east side of her yard, in a smallish patch of open land. You could see the neighboring yards from there, and there was probably 3/4 of a mile to each side of us that belonged to my grandma. It was maybe 11 at night, and we were playing Truth or Dare after telling scary stories, and my 14-year-old cousin dared me and the 13-year-old to go walk through the paths for 10 minutes or so. I said yes right away, as I wasn't easily scared and rather level-headed, but my younger cousin was a bit more hesitant. We didn't bring a flashlight because it wasn't pitch dark yet, and we could see enough to not get lost. We were walking through the paths for about 5 minutes, and I could barely see the fire through the trees when we decided to turn. In the middle of the path was a large dog-like creature hunched over with its front ends an inch from the ground. What I remember most is how its eyes were so effing bright white, and it was a humanoid dog shaped with a human-like head, but a dog-like body with human hands and human feet. It looked right at us, and I know I was paralyzed with fear as it dashed away in the opposite from us, towards the creek that ran through the yard. Eventually, my cousin and I screamed bloody murder, and the other cousins and my grandma come running to us. I don't remember much here because I was really disoriented and I couldn't think properly, but I did wake up in bed, so I assumed that I was brought up to the house. All the kids slept in the basement, in a big room with sliding glass doors to the outside, as the room was on the side that wasn't underground. My bed was pressed against a big glass window, and I could see my cousins playing outside down below. The house is in Michigan, so it gets slightly chilly even in the end of August, and there was a slight breeze, so I put on a jacket and I ran to join them outside, skipping breakfast, not wanting to miss out on anything fun. When I got down to them, I could tell that they weren't playing, but rather running to get my grandma. Her dogs, both of them, were dead. They were ripped up. That night, we went to bed early. I woke up at maybe 2 in the morning because I felt something hit my head. My cousins were all sitting on the double bed opposite of me on the other side of the room. There was one bunk bed and 2 double beds. The double beds for me and my 14-year-old cousin. They were being quiet and just staring at me. The 13-year-old nodded his head towards the window. I froze. They all looked afraid. I turned my head slightly to the side, and that's whenever I seen something I wish I would have never have seen. What I saw, really messed up looking face pressed against the window with gaping eyes looking down at me. I screamed so loud, and I bolted. My grandma called the police after I told her what happened, and they found nothing. I went home after that and have never ever been there during the night again. If you know what this could be, please tell me. I would say it was probably what people are calling the dog man or the werewolf or the upright canine. This story really made me think about something. My little cousin, back whenever my granny, I told y'all that she had had a stroke, and my my mom and her sisters was taking time staying, nights with her to take care of her so that she was able to stay at home. My job in the mornings, I was 16 years old, was to pick the kids up for school, and I would take them to school, my cousins, and then I would go to school, and then I would pick them up after school, and then I would bring them back out to my granny's, which was about 22 miles from school. My little cousin was playing outside. She was probably 10 years old. And of course, everybody down at my granny's was familiar with these creatures. It was something that had happened all of their lives, and of course, got brought into our lives. So we were all familiar with the stories and what had happened, and the scary nights and having to call people and the banging on the house. I mean, we all went through it. So one day she was outside playing, and at the back of my granny's house there was a garden. Now my grandpa had fenced the garden in. He had passed away, but the garden was still there. He had fenced it in, and at the bottom of the garden he had a piece of tin that he ran around the bottom to keep the rabbits out. Well, the garden connected to the field. The field was behind the garden, and the grass was tall in the field. They didn't have cows anymore, and they were too old, to farm the cows and everything, so the pasture was grown up. We would still burn it every year, but the cat, it just wasn't hayed, so it was tall that time of year, probably in July. Well, anyway, she was outside playing, and all this stuff had been going on, and all the prowlers and all that kind of stuff, the scratching on the house, the howls, and the heavy breathing, and trying to get in the doors and rattling the doorknobs, and climbing up in the trees and watching us through, through the trees, through the windows, and just a lot of weird stuff going on at that time. And plus my granny, she was really sick at the time. Uh, anyway, she was playing outside, and they heard her start screaming, and she was screaming like, like a kid does when they're hurt really bad. And they all ran outside, and they ended up meeting her halfway, to the front door. And what happened really made me really start thinking about these things, which made me and my cousin hunt them even harder. Is the fact that she was playing outside, and whatever this was, she said, stuck its long, hairy arm through the grass, from the field by the garden, between the fence and the garden, like a little corner right there, like a 90-degree corner with the garden and then the barbed wire fence that went in. It stuck its hand through there. And she didn't say anything about claws, but she said it had a long, skinny hand with long, skinny fingers. And it was making the motion for her to come here. Well, after she tried to ignore it and started walking toward the house because she knew that it was not something she was supposed to go to, it started saying her name. But I'm not going to say her real name, but let's just say her name was Mary. It would have said it somewhat like, Mary. It would drag the names out. Of course, she took off running and screaming and, screaming for her mom. After that, none of the kids were even allowed to play outside by themselves. They ended up setting chairs out front so that they could watch the kids inside of the gated yard. I think that day, I'm not sure what its intentions were. I think it had bad intentions that day, but I also think that it was using that tin on that garden, and it was laying in that tall grass back there, and I think it was reaching around that tin to try to get her to come over there. And if it could have grabbed her there, the way my grandpa's was, it could have ran from there straight back to the big mulberry tree on the hill, and then below that the land went down. And it could have went down over that hill, and it would have been off into the creek, and God knows where it would have took her. But I think that day, out of all the times, we've had a lot of things, happen down there, I think that was one of the more sinister times. And I think that's probably would have ended really bad. I think it actually was trying to take an opportunity, and I think that would have been a very sad thing. Thankfully, she's very smart, and she knew not to go over to it, and she's doing well today. But I just wanted to share that with y'all and let you know that, even though it's daytime and your kids are playing outside, sometimes it doesn't have to be dark for there to be monsters there. And that was a prime example. It was a hot, sunny day when this happened. So Just always be on the lookout. Keep your kids close to you, especially if you're camping this summer, you're fishing or whatever. Make sure they're sitting in front of you. Don't have them, where you think you know where they're at, behind you or whatever. Have them in front of you where you can see them. It only takes a second, and it's easy just to set them up in front of you. So, until next time, guys, keep your head on a swivel. Don't be something's dinner. I appreciate you all, and I'll see you all on the next one.